You know how a musician produces a song that makes them really famous, it's like their big hit, and then in order to capitalize on that success, they try to make a follow-up song that's like the big hit, but just isn't the same? That's probably what the producers of this film are feeling right now, because they tried to follow up This Is the End with another raunchy comedy that slowly ramps up the shock. Can Neighbors ride the wave, or will it merely slip into the ocean for a mediocre wipeout? Neighbors attempts to carry on the same style of shock humor that was seen in This Is the End. And while This Is the End kind of slowly ramped up the shock by following each shock humor joke with another shock humor joke, this film kind of takes a more traditional / contemporary style. It's in kind of an awkward place with this particular style in and of itself, but it basically takes its more shocking jokes and spaces them out throughout the film, creating comedic beats, but also running the risk of creating some pretty boring lulls. And unfortunately for this film, the peaks aren't really that high, and the lulls are really noticeable as a result. The main problem is that this is another one of those films where the trailers pretty much showed you all the good bits. All the jokes that would have been memorable, you already saw if you saw the trailer. And even with stuff that they held on to, there aren't really that many jokes within the film itself that they didn't show in the trailer that really stick out, that really are all that memorable. They just feel kind of either or lifted from other sources. There's only one instance of shock humor, well, I guess two, that I can moderately recall, but the problem with one of them is that they're so short that the shock doesn't really sink in, and the other is just kind of not so much shock humor, but rather just the same kind of humor we'd been seeing throughout the film at that point, so it wasn't really all that shocking. While the film was moderately entertaining, I was able to get into the story, it just kind of lacked that organic element that This Is the End had. Kind of that magic that came from the chemistry of the actors as they played off each other, as well as the fact that the director kind of kept pushing them for more, kind of to go beyond their comfort zone and then even further. With this film, although our main stars like Seth Rogen and Zac Efron, a little bit of David Franco, I think his name is, a little bit of some of the side characters did a good job, but it just has that kind of that factory-made feel that you can tell that this is more of a case of, okay, studio, we're just going to be making a Seth Rogen comedy. That's really what it felt like. It felt kind of factory-made. It just kind of lacked that almost naturalness, that almost that organicness, that chemistry that made This Is the End work. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are you comparing this to This Is the End? These are two separate movies. Well, the producers made the mistake of having the fact that this was being brought to us by the same people who brought us This Is the End be a major part of their advertising campaign, so the comparison is gonna be made. I mean, if they didn't really push the fact that, oh, it's made by the same producers who made This Is the End, then I probably would have just seen this as just more of just a run-of-the-mill sort of raunchy comedy. But I think the main issue is that by latching onto a film that kind of set a bar pretty high, it set my expectations pretty high, and so I was mostly disappointed. All in all, the one-hit wonder analogy is pretty much applicable here. This is basically kind of the failed follow-up to try to capitalize on the success of a much better film, but it just isn't the same. It doesn't pack the same punch, and doesn't even take nearly as many risks as This Is the End did. Couple that with kind of the very boring lulls where there aren't really that many jokes, as well as kind of the out-of-a-place attempts at drama, and the film's just kind of Again, moderately entertaining, but this is definitely a dollar theater movie. You do not want to pay full price to see this film. It's not worth it. That said, I give Neighbors a 3.5 out of 5. Just to be clear, I know this has kind of been confusing for some people, but it would have gotten a 3, but the fact that I actually was entertained and was able to get into the story bumped it up to the 0.5. So, yeah, there's that. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. As for next week's, let's hope that we don't have another Gino on our hands as I take a look at Godzilla. See you then.